Hello, and welcome to the most recent compilation episode. Couple of refreshers about how we do things around here. I'm not AI, I'm a real human voice, and if you see somebody in the comments claiming that I am AI, just let them be. They are obviously new, and it's okay for other people to be wrong. They'll find out. As far as ads go, for my YouTube friends, I've got an ad break after story number 1, story number 2, and story number 3. The remainder of the episode is completely interruption-free. And for my podcast friends, all 3 of those ads play after the 3rd story. I try to get those out of the way as quick as I can so that you can enjoy this episode. As we begin, let me know what part of the world you're listening from and what you might be doing while you listen. I'm curious. Well, let's begin. Alright, so check this out. The ramen bowl that shouldn't have been. I haven't really had any weird experiences like this before, and I wanted to shrug it off. But my husband is a huge skeptic and usually comes up with some explanation for everything. However, this one stumped him. I was serving dinner tonight, soup, and I was getting ready to ladle it into our bowls. I noticed that we had 4 of these particular bowls in the cupboard. This was extremely strange and confused me almost immediately because we bought this specific set of 4 bowls at Target many years ago. There are only 2 of us in our house, so we would never have purchased 6. Anyway, about 2 years ago, we broke one of them, which really bummed me out because I hate having an odd number of dishes. So we've had 3 of them this whole time, and I am 100% certain of this. I actually paused when I opened the cupboard because I was like, what in the frosted flakes is going on? And I said to my husband, we only have 3 of these ramen bowls, right? And he said yes, because we broke one a long time ago. So I pulled them out and I showed him all 4. And he was speechless. I shrugged it off in the moment. I grabbed 2 of the bowls and 2 big plates for garlic bread. As I was getting the plates out, one crashed hard onto the counter, but somehow didn't break. We both breathed a sigh of relief and headed to the table to start eating. Halfway through the meal, my husband, who is not a clumsy person, suddenly dropped the ramen bowl onto the big plate, and both of them shattered immediately. And we looked at each other in shock. So now, we're back to 3 ramen bowls again, and 1 broken plate, which I had almost shattered just moments prior. It just feels like the universe heard me and corrected its mistake. I don't know, man. It was weird, and I feel weird just talking about it. What do you think happened? Did my daughter just bypass reality? I still can't explain this. About 3 years ago, when my daughter was around 4, I had a sitter over and went into my room to get ready to leave. I closed and locked the door, and I specifically remember making sure that it was completely shut and fully locked. A few minutes went by, and I heard my daughter at the door, loudly jiggling the handle, trying to get in and calling for me. I was around the corner in my bathroom, and when I came out, maybe a minute later to let her in, she was just standing there, right inside the room. The door was still closed, and it was still locked behind her, and I never heard the door open. I also never heard it close. I asked her how she got in, and she just stood there and said, I don't know. It really freaked me out. I asked the sitter if she saw anything, but she was in the other room and didn't know what happened either. Maybe there's a logical explanation, but I don't know. I haven't been able to come up with one. What if the sky really is just a projection? I have to start by saying that there were absolutely no drugs, no alcohol, or anything of that kind involved. We were as sober as one could be. This happened about 2 years ago. Not last summer, but the one before that. My boyfriend, we were 24 to 25 at the time, and I went to visit his grandma in the countryside for a few days. One night, probably around 8 p.m., we went out to the garden to relax and watch the fireflies that were just starting to show up. The sun had already set, but the sky was still this pale blue, not fully dark yet. His grandma has a bed outside in the garden that's used as a sort of a couch, so we decided to lie there for a while. A few minutes in, I clearly noticed a pale white grid shape in the sky. Wondering what the hell I was seeing, I started to ask my boyfriend. I said, "Do you see?" And then he cuts me off with, "The grid? Yes, I do." So it's not like one of us just influenced the other. We both saw it, clearly and at the same time. We joked around that the sky was fake and we were in some matrix or something. We often do have matrixy experiences, so this wasn't exactly shocking. But this was the cherry on top of everything else. I don't remember thinking to take a picture, or maybe we just assumed that it wouldn't be visible enough and figured it was pointless to try. I'm not really sure. We just kind of, accepted it, shrugged it off. We had our dinner, and then we went to bed. 2 years later, I've still never seen it again. And trust me, I've tried. Every now and then, one of us will say, "Hey, you remember the grid?" And the other will reply with, "Yeah, still haven't seen it since." I love looking at the sky. The clouds, all the colors, the stars and the shapes, man, you name it. But yet, I've never seen anything like that since. Not even a glimpse. I've tried searching for similar cases online, but all I could find were stories of people on psychedelics seeing grids or honeycomb shapes in the sky. But again, we were completely sober. Every time I remember it, I don't even know what to think or how to feel about it. Why haven't we seen it again? What could it have even been? I keep wondering, was it a force field? Or a projection glitch? Was the sky not real and we just caught a slip? I don't know, honestly. But I hope that someone else out there has seen it too, while sober, and maybe they can help shed some light on this. Where did the restaurant go? I still don't know how to explain this, but I'll try my best. A friend of mine and I went to a mall called A+ near our neighborhood to eat. On the top floor, there's a local fast food chain restaurant that most people know and eat at. We sat down, ordered, and had some chicken and some salads, and then we left. I also go to the gym in the same mall, and when I came back 2 days later for my workout, the place was gone. And I don't mean closed, but it was completely transformed into another establishment in the span of that 48 hours. I asked the employees what happened to the other place, and they looked at me in the eyes like I was crazy. And the guy who, quote-unquote, owns the new place told me he didn't know what I was talking about and asked me to leave. The name, the signage, the furniture, everything was different. It was clearly a completely new place, but no one acknowledged the existence of the restaurant that we had just eaten at 2 days prior. I even asked a couple who were sitting there, but they said they didn't know what I was talking about either. Now, I understand it's possible that the place could have been bought and renovated, but the fact that no one says anything about it, and that it happened within 48 hours, or maybe even less, is deeply disturbing to me. I asked other business owners in the mall as well, but no one seems to know anything. I don't know, I feel incredibly weirded out. What could cause everyone to hide the truth like this? And for the record, I don't drink or smoke, and I'm 20 years old. I could really use some help. Somebody left a comment on this story asking, do either you or your friend have a receipt from the place at which you ate and or charges on your credit cards? Can you look up the place online and look at the address? What did your friend say? Did either of you take any photos of your food or salads for social media and perhaps tag the place? OP responds with, I don't know, man. I've been going there for over 4 years. It's just some place. I never really thought about it. And no, I don't have the receipt. It's probably in the trash somewhere. But we've taken multiple photos when we used to eat there. You can even see the logo on the corner of the plates. A person that I used to eat there with frequently says he remembers the place crystal clear and is just as confused as I am. I did look it up on Google Maps and it doesn't show the name of the old or the current restaurant. The night that my reality bent inside a hotel bathroom. I still can't explain this, but I guess I'll do my best. In January of 2024, I went to a hotel in Niagara Falls on the Canadian side with my 10-year-old son. We had a room with a spectacular view of the falls, and it was one of the hotels closest to the falls, and we were on the 12th floor, in case that's relevant for someone. The room had 2 beds. My son fell asleep in one, and I in the other. I don't recall the exact time that we fell asleep, but it was sometime after 9 p.m. I suddenly woke up because I sensed that too much light was coming from the falls, hence why I mentioned the view. Also, I sleep best in the dark. I looked over to my son's bed, but he wasn't there. I assumed he was in the bathroom, especially since I could see a very dim light filtering from underneath the closed bathroom door. Before checking the bathroom, I went to the window to close the curtains, and to get there, I had to pass by the entire length of my son's bed. From the light coming through the window, I could clearly see that the bed was empty and the covers were crumpled. After I closed the curtains, I went to the bathroom, and that's when I noticed the light filtering out wasn't yellow like usual bathroom light. It was white, and I hadn't thought about that before. It all happened so fast. I pushed the bathroom door open, and I didn't see my son. I noticed the tub curtain was closed, and behind it I could see a small rectangular light about the size of a cell phone. It was pulsating. I freaked out. I felt paralyzed. I called out to my son, but he didn't answer. I stood there for maybe another 5 or 6 more seconds, though it felt like much longer, debating whether to rip the curtain away. The hotel curtains weren't completely opaque, so all I saw was the pulsating light, but no outline or shadow of a body, no silhouette, no 10-year-old son. just the light. During those few seconds, my mind raced through so many possibilities. Did a homeless person get in the hotel room? Has my 10-year-old discovered, well, let's just say unlimited access to the internet? This person adds some edits to clarify. They say, I want to be clear. I didn't actually believe that someone was there. I was trying to convince myself that someone was, because the alternative, the one where I had just witnessed a floating light, was a little bit too crazy to process in the moment. I kept trying to come up with a normal explanation, but the fact that I didn't see any figure or shadow should have made it clear that the tub was empty. And if someone had been in there, they would have moved, made a sound, or done something. But there was nothing. Just that light. The idea that someone had broken in was really me trying to rationalize what I saw. And fear isn't always rational. And maybe someone with a psychology background could explain it better. Anyway, so I rushed out, still stunned, and lo and behold, my son was on the bed where he was supposed to be, watching his tablet, which now I could hear playing. I asked, "Where were you?" And he said, "What do you mean?" I asked again, "Where were you just now?" And he responded with, "I've been here the whole time. I don't understand what you're asking." I looked back at the bathroom, and it was dark. I was so shaken. I didn't do anything. I told my son to go to sleep, and I climbed into my own bed, clutching my phone and waiting anxiously to hear something from the bathroom. At some point, I eventually fell asleep. And when I woke up the next morning, the first thing I did was rush to the bathroom looking for any evidence of a break-in or someone hiding. But of course, there was nothing. I was completely flustered, and quite frankly, I still am. On the drive home, I kept trying to reason through it. I even talked to my doctor about it, and he said it was probably due to extreme stress, which is fair, and part of the reason why I took the trip in the first place. But honestly, I've been through much worse in my life. This kind of stress was nowhere near that. A couple days later, I asked my son directly, "Were you in the bathtub at the hotel the other night?" And he looked at me like I had lost my mind and said, "No. Why would I be in the bathtub? In the dark?" I pushed a little, thinking maybe he was just being secretive. I told him he wouldn't get in trouble. I just wanted to know how he got back to the bed without me seeing or hearing him. But he insisted I wasn't in the bathtub. Needless to say, I felt ridiculous interrogating a 10-year-old over something like this. And that's when I started seriously trying to get to the bottom of it. I considered contacting the hotel, but after that conversation with my son, I couldn't even explain what I'd be asking them. It wasn't a high-traffic night, and the hotel had more than enough staff. There was only one way in or out. And here's the kicker. When I originally booked the hotel, I accidentally booked the wrong location. There are 2 hotels from this chain in Niagara Falls. I meant to book one, but I ended up at the other, and I only realized it when I passed the one that I thought I booked. Was that part of it? I don't know. But if anyone could shed some light or share a similar experience, I'd really appreciate it. I've had deja vu and, premonitions before, but nothing like this. Missing book fell on my head out of nowhere. I was a junior or a senior in high school, so this must have been 94, 95. I know that was a long time ago, but I remember this incident perfectly because it makes absolutely no sense. I was reading The Color Purple by Alice Walker in my bedroom. No one else was home. At some point, I had to go to the bathroom, so I left the book on my bed. The bathroom was just down the hall, and when I came back, maybe just a minute later, the book was gone. I know for a fact that I left it on my bed, and still, no one was home. Someone would have had to come upstairs and pass directly by the bathroom door to get to my room, and the door had been closed that whole time. There was no way that someone could have snuck in or out without me hearing it. I was only gone for a minute. I was irritated because I'd really been enjoying the book, and now it had just disappeared. I asked my mom later that evening if she'd seen it, but she told me that she hadn't. Several days went by, and I remember debating whether to just start a different book. I mean, I used to read a lot at the time, but I liked to finish one before starting another. I still couldn't understand where that book could have even gone to. Then, I was in my bedroom again, standing near the closet, and something fell and hit me on the head. I looked down to see what had fallen, and it was the missing book. It was The Color Purple, the exact same copy that I'd left on my bed just several days prior. I remember this sort of strange, sick feeling in my stomach, like I was going to throw up. Not from pain, but because I felt like I had just seen something that I wasn't supposed to see. Like reality had glitched. It creeped me out big time. Different doors on the same floor. This just happened to me. My wife and I are staying in a hotel tonight that's over 10 stories tall. After checking in, we took the elevator up to the 7th floor. Exiting the elevator, we walked to the right and followed the numbers on the wall to our room, which was actually behind the elevator shaft. There are 3 elevators, by the way. The elevators are positioned in the middle of the hallway, meaning the hallway goes all the way around them. Anyway, our room ended up being on the other side of the elevator shaft, so it would have been shorter if we had just exited left instead of right. But no matter, we found our room and we entered. Within a few minutes, my wife remembered that she left her laptop in the car, so I left the room to go get it for her. Upon re-entering the hotel lobby, I walked straight to the elevators and stepped inside the middle one. I pushed the button for the 7th floor, and when the doors opened, I walked out and turned left because I remembered our room was in that direction. And then it happened. As I walked around the corner of the elevator wall, I noticed that the room I was sure was ours had the wrong number. It said 716 instead of 706. I figured I must have walked too far, so I turned left, knowing that the numbers would get smaller as I moved along. Unfortunately, the cleaning lady was standing in the hallway with her cart, blocking the way to my room. She was speaking to someone through an open door, which I believed to be our room. She was standing just to the right of it, so I decided to walk all the way around the elevator shaft and approach from the other side. But when I finally turned the corner, I was shocked. The cleaning lady and her cart were gone. Completely nowhere to be found. I had only lost sight of her for maybe 15 seconds. I continued walking down the hallway, and there was my room, exactly where I thought it was, just around the corner from the elevator shaft. But only a minute earlier, that same room had been labeled 716, It's 10 rooms too high. I asked my wife if she had seen the cleaning lady, and she said no, she hadn't seen anyone at all. The woman had been wearing all black and speaking a language that I didn't recognize. It wasn't Spanish. I speak Spanish, and we're in Texas. I never saw her face, and I still can't explain it. An unexplainable flash of light. My boyfriend and I were just watching TV, and this burst of light just flashed in front of us in the bedroom. All of the blinds are closed, and there's no way that it was from a car or anything around us. We both just looked at each other like, what the heck was that we just saw? And usually, I'm the dramatic girlfriend, but this was eerie. He was freaking out as well. We can't find or think of any logical explanation for this. We even rewound our show to see if it was something in the show, but it wasn't. And there was nothing weird throughout the house, but we do have 2 male gray cats, and their eyes were wide open as well, seemingly reacting to the same thing that we were. Did I just glitch while driving? I'm not quite sure how to explain this, but I've heard about glitches in the Matrix before. I haven't really paid much attention to those stories, as they often seem pretty simple. However, I want to share an experience that I had yesterday that's changing my mind. Over the years, I've encountered paranormal occurrences from time to time, mostly related to ghosts, or shadows, or weird voices. In the last 5 years, there haven't been many, maybe just 1 or 2 encounters. But here's what happened yesterday, and it goes to another level, at least in my experience. I live in a mountainous area, about 18 miles from the closest grocery store, on a road that I drive a lot. Yesterday, we had a snowstorm. It wasn't too heavy, but the wind was strong, blowing snow all around in every direction. The mountain pass where I live is pretty flat, except for one hill with a farm at the top. When you reach that hill, you know the farm will come into view as soon as you crest it. So, I drove up the hill and I noticed the farm out of the corner of my eye. I expected the road to flatten out and stay flat for at least another 15 minutes, but suddenly, I continued to drive on what was now a flat road, hitting another hill. My mind was racing. I'm thinking, wait, where am I going? This is not how the road is supposed to be. And then, to my disbelief, the farm that I had just passed reappeared. The closest thing that I can compare it to is probably experiencing lag in a video game, where you jump back and then continue on again. There's no way that I could have turned around or driven the wrong way. It's only a single road. I didn't tell anyone about this because seeing ghosts and shadows feels like an everyday occurrence for me. But this is absolutely insane, in my opinion. I split into 2 physical manifestations of myself when I changed my mind in the last second. This happened at my mom's house. I was around 16 at the time, as were my friends. I was hanging out with a couple of my friends in the computer room of my mom's house around 2006. Anyone remember having a computer room growing up? Anyway, none of my friends had consistent, unsupervised internet access, So we would sit in the room with my mom's PC at all hours doing whatever a bunch of nerdy teenage anime/video game fangirls would do. The door next to the computer led to 2 rooms. Directly across was my mom's room. She wasn't home. And right around the corner was the bathroom. It wasn't a hallway, but more like a section of doors with the dining room next to it. The door to the kitchen on the left of the dining room and an open living room to the right. The 3 of us were sitting at the computer desk, 2 in chairs and 1 on the floor. I got up to use the bathroom, leaving both of my friends sitting in the chairs with the door fully in view. When I was leaving the bathroom, I was about to go back into the computer room, but I also wanted to go to the kitchen to grab a snack for all of us. As I exited the bathroom door, it was like I made both decisions at the same time. I suddenly felt tired, and everything narrowed into a tunnel vision with this visual snow effect. I remember turning toward the computer room door, but at the same time, walking through the dining room. I'm not sure how to explain it, but it was like my vision split. I was seeing both directions while I moved. Then the visual snow got heavier for a moment. And when I snapped out of it, I was standing in the kitchen holding the house phone as if I was about to call somebody. But there wasn't a single person that I would be calling at that time of the night, which was midnight. I shook my head and rubbed my eyes as I put the phone back down on the receiver. When I walked back into the room where my friends were, they asked, "What the hell was that? And how did you do it?" They told me that they had seen me standing in the doorway for several minutes with no expression on my face. At first, they didn't acknowledge me, but eventually asked if I was okay. They said I just continued to silently stare at them. They said it looked like me, but also didn't. It was like I was taller, and my clothes were just slightly different. This entity that was just standing there staring at my friends walked away around the corner, and when I walked in, I passed through it or something. The lights were off in the dining room, so to them it appeared like I went around the corner and then immediately came back to the doorway. Somehow, I had been standing in the doorway, staring down my friends, and at the same time I was in the kitchen, holding the house phone for no reason that I can explain. I guess I tried to do both things that I was considering when leaving the bathroom, and ended up standing around like an NPC in both situations. I forgot to grab a snack for us. Anyway, we all ended up going to my bedroom in the converted attic because all 3 of us were too creeped out to stay downstairs anymore. I think my cat found some lost decor in a parallel dimension. This happened a few months ago, and I've been meaning to post it, so here it goes. In August of last year, my best friend and I were super excited to shop for Halloween decor at Michael's craft store. We went and did some serious damage, each buying a bunch of items. One item that I was particularly excited about was a white cabinet, probably about 8 by 11 inches, filled with random little oddities, like a fake bird skull, some small apothecary jars, and similar quirky things. My best friend got one too. I brought my purchases home, and since it was only August, I put all the bags on the dining room table. We rarely eat there, so it's usually piled with random stuff. Fast forward 1 month, and I was finally ready to decorate for spooky season. I asked my husband to get the stuff out of storage, and I started unpacking those bags from Michael's. As I was going through everything, I realized that the white cabinet was missing. I went back to the dining room and I started looking everywhere. I cleaned off the entire table, I pulled out all the chairs, and when I couldn't find it there, I went out and checked my car. I looked under the seats, in the trunk. I looked everywhere. I asked my husband if he'd seen it, but he said no. To be fair, I have ADHD, so losing something isn't exactly uncommon for me. I asked him to help me look as well, and he did the exact same things I did. He pulled out the chairs, he checked my car, and searched every reasonable and even unreasonable place in the entire house. When it was still nowhere to be found, I called my best friend to make sure that I'd actually bought that. She said yes, she was sure that I had. All I could figure was that we were both mistaken, or maybe I'd somehow left it in the cart or something along those lines. It bugged me like crazy, but I accepted that it wasn't at my house. I went to order another one on the Michaels website, but it was sold out. I even went back to the store, but all of the white ones were gone, so I ended up buying a similar one in black. A couple more weeks went by, and it was just a few days before Halloween. One morning, I was doing the morning feeding for my pets. One of my cats, who just loves to be a brat, always makes me come find her for feeding time. It's like a game for her. She jingles the bells on her collar, and I have to track her down. I was looking for her, and I heard the bells coming from the dining room. I went to grab her, and she was sitting on the table. And as I came around to reach for her, I glanced down, and there was the white cabinet. It was sitting in the chair right behind her. That chair was her favorite one, and my husband and I had both picked her up out of it dozens of times since the cabinet went missing, so there is absolutely no chance that it had been there this whole time. My husband isn't a prankster, and he swears up and down that he didn't find it or put it there. He didn't have anything to do with it. This cat is a weird one. She's gotten out of closed rooms before, and once she even brought me a feather, despite being an indoor-only cat with no way to get one. So, we joke that she must have gone into the void, found the cabinet, and brought it back just for me. An unexplained sound. This isn't a dramatic story, but it still creeps me out years later when I think about it. One time, I was alone at home. My husband and my daughter were out for the day. I was having lunch in the kitchen and getting ready to leave for work. The house was quiet, and I was reading on my phone while eating. Then, I heard the distinct sound of a cell phone starting an outgoing call. The sound came from around the corner from the hall leading into the kitchen. Being in a relaxed state, my first thought was that it was my husband walking toward the kitchen. But then I remembered he was already at work for the day, and I had dropped my daughter off at school. I froze. My heart started racing, and I listened intently. The sound disappeared. It wasn't a continuous phone call, just the initial dialing out three-tone sound, followed by one or two rings. I can't remember exactly. And then, dead silence. I put 911 into my phone, ready to hit dial. I stayed in a state of frozen fear for quite a few minutes, listening, fully expecting someone to make some kind of noise, as I was now certain that someone else was in the house. The hall leading to the kitchen was also the way to the front door to leave, so I was essentially trapped. As the minutes went by and the dead silence continued, I knew I had to do something. and I needed to get to work. I grabbed a broom and I called out, "Hello?" I steeled myself and went into the hall. There was nobody in the house. I checked everywhere. I looked in every closet, in every room. I left to go to work, but I stayed creeped out for the entire day. My husband rechecked the house when he came home, and we've had no other incidents or any evidence of something like an attic squatter, which he also checked. I don't think I'll ever know what that really was. The moonstone that defied reality. When I was a teenager, I don't remember the exact age, it was maybe 16, I bought a moonstone at a sales booth at a fair, and for whatever reason, I left it on a bathroom shelf over the course of several days. One morning, I found the stone cut in half in its usual place. In theory, it could have fallen to the floor and split. I was confused about how this had happened, and I asked my mom, wondering if she had dropped it and somehow only put half of it back on the shelf. She said she had no idea and had neither dropped it nor put it back. I searched the bathroom for the other half, but never found it. I even looked in the cat's litter box. My mom said that she hadn't vacuumed that day, so it couldn't have been sucked up by the machine. One could maybe come up with explanations, but they all seemed very unlikely, and the missing half of the stone was never found anywhere. I kinda shrugged it off, although I sometimes told people about it, as I always considered it to be, a strange event. I kept the remaining half of the stone and I stored it in a decorative glass jar for several years with many other gemstones. Besides the white moonstone, I only own like 2 other bigger stones of a totally different color, while the rest were tiny, so there was no way to somehow confuse any of them. I would look at the stones from time to time. Anyway, at around the age of 22, I was living in my own apartment by myself, and one day I emptied the glass jar to have a look at all the stones again. And strangely, the moonstone was missing, and I was really confused about how I could have lost it. Again, I shrugged it off as just a weird coincidence, thinking I must have somehow lost the other half now. Time passed. I was still living in the mentioned apartment, and one night, I was lying awake and had one of those moments, musing about stuff like magic and manifestation, wondering if there could be any truth to it at all. Over the years, I had experienced quite a few strange things, but at the same time, I always refused to believe in anything that was not scientifically proven. That night, however, I concentrated very strongly on asking the universe to please give me a sign if it could hear me, and if any of it was true. I remembered the moonstone, and I basically told the universe, if you can hear me, let the moonstone reappear, thinking that if I looked into the glass jar in the morning and it was back, there would be no way that I could ever doubt the existence of some kind of magic. When I woke up the next morning, I remembered my little dialogue with the universe from the night before, and by the light of day, it seemed really stupid. Kind of rolling my eyes at myself, I thought, I know that damn stone won't be there, of course, but let's just take a quick look anyway. And it was back. Well, the cut-in-half version of it was, just resting on top of all of the other gemstones in the jar, very prominently, I might add, as if it had always been there. I must have stood there looking like an idiot, staring at it for several minutes. My weird story had now gained yet another chapter to every now and then tell someone about. I still own the stone, and since that last time, nothing's ever happened again, which I'm almost 40 now, by the way. But part of me has always been wondering if someday, somehow, the missing half might also mysteriously reappear. I always thought it would be a great story finale if someday I met a man who owns the other half. I have to admit, though, I'm still skeptical about magic being real. If there is something to it, the universe is probably a bit pissed at me now, but, well, rationality just kicked in again. I mean, there has to be a very mundane, yet logical explanation for it all, right? Would love to hear your thoughts, and especially if something like this has ever happened to any one of you. Did a Ukrainian folklore return my headphones? This happened yesterday, and it's still messing with my head a bit. In Ukraine, we have this small tradition. When you lose something, you ask the house ghost, a domovik, where it went. It's nothing big. It's usually just a quick, house ghost, where is it, kind of thing. My grandma always did it, and so I did it too, kind of half-jokingly. Anyway, I couldn't find my headphones. They're always on the windowsill with my keys. I checked there first, of course, but didn't see them. Then I checked the couch, under the couch. I looked on the shelves, in all of my jacket pockets, and even in the bathrooms. And these things were just gone. After 15 minutes, I said, "Domovik, please show me where they are." And I'm not kidding. 1 minute later, I walk back to the windowsill, and they're just there, sitting like they never disappeared. Maybe the house ghost is just a UI glitch, but I'm curious. Has anyone else had the same experience? Green means go, but not this time. This happened some 6 or so years ago, maybe 8 at the most. At the time, I worked pretty far from home, a couple of towns over, in fact. Why work so far from home? Well, they were hiring, and it was the only job that I could secure that used my degree and paid more than stocking shelves at Sam's Club. Once I got off the highway, my commute took me through several school zones. If I left home too late, my commute, with the tollway and the highway combined, would go from around 45 minutes to at least an hour and 30 minutes. So, to avoid school zone hell, I would leave at an ungodly hour in the morning and get to work way too early. With that background set, here's the glitch moment. It was a morning like any other. The sun wasn't out yet. I had just gotten off the highway and stopped at a red light. It was way too early for anyone with a choice to be out of bed. I wasn't listening to the radio, and my cassette adapter, which I used to play music from my phone on the car speakers, was on the fritz. Yeah, I'm old, and the car is older than some people I know. Sue me. So, I wasn't listening to music or to whatever audiobook I was into at the time. I was just sitting there, at the red light, thinking about nothing. There were no other cars on the road, and the only lights were the street lights, some flickering, and some were just out completely. And the only sound was my car idling. The light turned green. I looked to the right, empty street. I looked to the left, nothing. And then I looked forward, but I didn't take my foot off the brake. I waited a few seconds, and I genuinely can't remember if I said this out loud or if I just thought it. But I said, I wonder why I'm not driving. At that exact moment, this muscle car roared through the red light, blazing by at what felt like Mach speed. Its tires screeched like they were on fire as it made a turn somewhere to my left, and then the sound quickly faded away. I sat there, and again, not sure if I said it out loud or was just thinking this, but I thought, oh, that's why. Then, I calmly put my foot on the gas and drove on like an old person, because cars are expensive and money is tight. I counted the seconds that it would have taken me to get to the spot where that guy would have hit me, and it was the exact amount of time that it took for the light to turn green, for me to check the sides, and for the car to come flying through the intersection. I went to work, and later, it finally hit me. I almost died. Or, at the very least, I would have ended up in so much medical debt that it would have been better if I did just die. I think I timeline jumped. Bear with me here. I'm tired. Anyway, I was in the shower, and I decided to wash my hair, and this wasn't the usual day for it, by the way. I grabbed the shampoo, I put it on my hands, and smeared it around. When I reached my hands up to put the shampoo on my hair, suddenly, I found myself standing under the water with my eyes closed, hands at my sides. My hands didn't smell like shampoo, and my hair didn't smell like shampoo either. It was as if I had never put the shampoo on my hands in the first place. And now, some people are acting differently, and I'm checking my chapstick and my earbuds. I specifically remembered putting them down before getting into the shower, and it's late right now, so I'm planning to check in the morning to see if anything else has changed. If something is different, it will probably be with my laptop, my desk setup, or my computer. I kind of feel like I jumped timelines in between putting shampoo on my hands and then opening my eyes. But I don't know. There's something off about my sister. For some context, I know this whole thing is going to sound cliche, but this is weird as hell. My sister, who's 2 years old, was literally being born on the same exact day that my best friend died. I also had a brother who died as a result of a stillbirth about 14 years ago. We were at the cemetery where both my best friend and my brother are buried. Somehow, my sister kept looking at my brother's grave and saying things like, "my brother," and "baby," and things like that. Nobody has ever told her anything about this, of course. She's 2. And no one's even brought it up around her either. There's no way that she should know. My best friend died in a car accident, and when we go to her grave, my sister says stuff like, "Emmy friend," or things like, "in the car," or even, "it's me." She also says, "in heaven," when we visit both graves, and what's even creepier is that she looks eerily similar to my best friend. She doesn't know about my best friend because, well, for one, like I said, she's 2, but also I just don't like to talk about it. It's a traumatic event that I had to witness. My counselor even called my mom on Thursday because I was at a breaking point, saying that I needed help or I might hurt myself. Obviously, my sister doesn't understand the concept of things like that, but she started telling my mom things like, "Emmy die," "Emmy sick," Emmy go heaven, and so on. Another strange thing, my cousin was pregnant, and before anyone even knew, my sister pointed at her belly and said, "Baby. My baby." After my cousin miscarried, my sister pointed at her belly again and asked, "Where's baby?" and then said, "Heaven." Now, I don't know if she's just really smart or what, but I find this to be extremely disturbing. Person disappeared right in front of me. This happened just last week. I was walking down the street, and a person with an orange scarf on their head was walking toward me on the same side of the road. As they were approaching, they got momentarily blocked from view by a tree. When I passed the tree, they were gone. They weren't in front of me anymore. I turned around to see if they had somehow sped up and managed to pass me while being blocked by the tree, but nope, nothing. I even checked the other side of the road to see if they had crossed while out of my line of sight, but all I saw were a couple of school kids waiting for the bus. I couldn't figure out where they could have gone. I was walking closer to the inside of the sidewalk, so I think I would have noticed if they had entered a building. Plus, there were no entrances on either side of the street, just long stretches of fences with no openings for quite a while. You'd think that someone with an orange scarf would be easy to spot, right? At the time, I guess I just shrugged it off and moved on because I was in a hurry, but, you know, thinking back on it now, that was really weird, and I still can't figure out where that person went. How did my childhood toy end up in my new couch? This literally just happened, and strangely enough, I'm watching The Matrix right now. I got deja vu when I saw this toy in the crack of the couch, just like when I was around 9 or 10 years old. So, I'm sitting here eating Wendy's and watching The Matrix with my dad. It's about midnight, and he just went to bed. I have my pen jammin', which is a pen that I like to use, and I accidentally dropped it down the crack of the couch. While trying to fish it out, I spotted this toy thing that I made in church when I was a kid. It was from Christmas time, when we took pipe cleaners and red and white beads to make little candy canes and shepherd sticks, letter J for Jesus, and so on. I made it when I was about 9 years old. This was 13 years ago. The weird thing is, we had a completely different couch back then. I distinctly remember dropping it down the crack of that old couch and having to fish it out. I think we got rid of that couch when I was 11 or 12, and we replaced it with a leather couch. Even before we got that leather couch, I hadn't seen this toy for a long time. Then, about 2 or maybe 3 years ago, we got another leather couch. It's the one that we still have now. By that point, I didn't even remember that this toy that I made existed. Random documents appeared in my car. This has been bugging me for 7 years, and it's only just occurred to me to ask the Reddit hive mind. I'm curious to see if anyone has any theories as to where this came from. I'm in the UK and bought my car brand new in 2017 with 0 miles on the clock. The car has never been borrowed or driven by anyone but me. Only my friends and family have ever been passengers in it. In 2019, just 2 years later, I was cleaning the car, and under the passenger seat was an A4 turquoise folder that I'd never seen before. I opened it, and inside was a plane ticket from London to New York City, Kennedy, dated December 18, and a receipt for a $52 toll in Manhattan. Also, a printed email confirmation for the Element Times Square West Hotel, and an email confirmation for the return flight back. The name on all of these documents was for a man that I've never heard of. Let's just call him Fred Jones. I asked every single person that I knew and who had been in the car where these documents came from, and no one knew who Fred Jones was. At the time, I was at university and I couldn't find anyone in the system by that name. I searched online and I messaged the only person that I could find with the same name, but I got no response. The only other theory I could think of was that my car had been serviced in November, so maybe the mechanics would have been in the car. But this didn't make sense to me still, because the receipts were from New York, which was after the trip in December. There were no other identifying features besides the name and the fact that they were in New York, but I'm still 100% sure I don't know this person, and neither does anyone I know. Does anyone have any ideas, or maybe some more creative ways to help me solve this mystery? One year passed in a single second. When I was a little boy, around 8 years old, I'm 31 now, my mom took me to a kid's pool party. One of her friends had twin girls around the same age as me, and it was their birthday that day. My memories of that day aren't abundant. I don't remember every detail of what happened. However, the little moments I do recall are crystal clear. We arrived at the pool where the twins and the other kids were playing. My mother started talking with the other moms while I joined the kids in the pool. There were many things at this party, like inflatable castles, tables full of food and drinks, and a little park with slides and such that I couldn't keep my eyes off of. That park seemed to have something special, and I couldn't stop looking at it. It was as if it was calling to me. It wasn't very close to where we were. I mean, it was probably 20 meters or 60 feet away. But kids from the party were constantly running back and forth between the park and the pool. I kept swimming for a bit, but eventually, I couldn't resist the urge any longer. I had to go to the park. When I got there, I climbed up the biggest slide and went down. It wasn't too tall, but, for an 8-year-old, it was fun. After sliding down, I just stayed at the bottom of the slide, sitting there, without moving. I don't know why, but I just couldn't bring myself to get up. Then I noticed that this really big, obese kid getting ready to slide down. I remember being scared that he'd hit me, but I still didn't move. He came down at full speed and hit me right in the back, and as soon as he did, I blacked out. Not like fainting, but more like everything just went dark instantly. When I opened my eyes, I was suddenly in my room, in my bed, in my usual sleeping position. I couldn't move at all, other than my eyes. I could hear sounds from outside of my bedroom, but I couldn't speak or even move my mouth. I was having sleep paralysis, though I didn't know it at the time. I thought I just had a strange dream, and I guess I eventually fell back to sleep. When I woke up later, normally, I couldn't shake the weird feeling. I asked my mom about the fat kid from the pool party, but she seemed confused. She didn't remember any party or any pool. I started to think that maybe I had been in a coma for a full year and I had just woken up, now aged 9. For 3 days, I kept telling people I was 9 years old, despite my mom correcting me. I was convinced that I had aged a year overnight. 3 days later, my mom told me that we were going to the pool again. I didn't think much of it until we arrived, and I noticed the exact same pool from my dreams. Everything was the same. The inflatable castles, the tables with all the junk on them, even the kids. And the twin girls were there too. It was like I was reliving the same event. I went to the park again. I climbed that same slide and I waited at the bottom just like before. And guess who comes up behind me? That same kid was now at the top of the slide. He came down, but this time, there was no blackout, just pain. I cried and I ran to my mom, and then I calmed down, trying to convince myself that I had just imagined the whole previous experience. Anyway, years passed, and I rarely thought about it. Recently, I shared this story with my wife, who found it fascinating and encouraged me to dig deeper. I called my mom to ask about that time, and to my shock, she remembered something odd. When she introduced me to the twins at the party, I told her I already knew them, even though she was sure that I hadn't met them before. That revelation gave me goosebumps. It had confirmed that I had experienced the dream before the actual party. Could this be connected to sleep paralysis or something else entirely? I don't know, but I'm eager to hear if anyone has experienced anything similar or has any insight into this strange event. Wooden statue turned to stone. I'm a big fan of r/glitch in the Matrix ever since I experienced my first glitch in 2022 and found this sub. Here's that story, which I finally decided to share. Growing up, my extended family spent a significant amount of time traveling overseas. They would bring back suitcases of treasures as gifts for those of us back home. These items have become somewhat of family heirlooms, several of which are on display in our homes. During the spring of 22, my mother and I were inside talking when we saw the forecast for that night predicting a storm. My mom had a patio garden in her backyard, which contained one of the aforementioned heirlooms. It was a handmade wooden carving of a man's head and neck. She had placed it outside the week before when she was decorating. Wanting to ensure the preservation of this wooden statuette, I told my mother that I would bring it inside. She replied that that's not necessary and it wouldn't be damaged due to the awning overhead. I, however, insisted on bringing the wooden carving indoors and placed it upon the mantel above the fireplace, listing termites and patio flooding and mold as some of the reasons for my doing so. Since it didn't matter much to my mom where the statue was, she agreed to keep it indoors. Fast forward the next day, after the storm had passed, I was sitting on the couch watching TV when I decided to get a book off of the shelf next to the mantel. As I neared the bookshelf and the statuette, I noticed immediately that something was off, and the statue was a shade darker than I remembered from the day before. Upon further inspection, I found that the carving was not only a darker shade, but now it was fully carved out of stone with no wood to speak of. Alarmed, I asked my mom what happened to the wooden statue, and she said it had always been stone. Now, this makes no sense to me for two reasons. One, I would not have brought the statue indoors to keep it out of the rain if I had originally known it was stone, since termites and mold and water issues would have never come up in the first place. And two, who in their right mind would pack a 30-pound stone statue in a suitcase for a flight with other items? As someone who travels semi-regularly, I pack light because of baggage weight limits and for ease of movements. To this day, I have no answers for this glitch. We have two other wooden head carvings that were unaffected by the glitch and remain wood. And my mom does not seem to remember the stone statue being wood. And even to this day, it remains stone. An old Mickey Mouse sticker appeared on my front door lock. This happened to me 10 minutes ago, and I got so freaked out I started to feel dizzy. So, I live with my boyfriend in a tiny old commie block apartment, and the door has this separate lock thing. Basically, you can lock the door with it only from the inside. I was going to the kitchen and I randomly looked at the front door when I saw an old, busted, little Mickey Mouse sticker on the lock. I've been living with my boyfriend for 1.5 years now. I use this lock daily and I've never seen this sticker. I just blurted out to him. I said, "Oh, look, a Mickey Mouse sticker." And he said, "Yeah, it's always been there. It was there when he bought the apartment. He even called his mom about it." Which we weren't together at that point, so I wouldn't know. But he never mentioned it to me though. And I know, it's not really a big thing that should be mentioned, but I swear, today's the first time I've ever seen that sticker on that lock. And now I can't look away. He doesn't understand why I'm so freaked out. I feel like I'm in shock. This person adds an edit that says, "My boyfriend said that he remembers the first time I came over to his apartment. He told me about the sticker then, jokingly." Which, I don't know, might be true? I don't remember exactly, because again, this is such a small, unimportant thing. But even if he did, and I forgot about it, it's crazy that I haven't seen it again until now, over a year later. I guess maybe the brain just ignores stuff that's not important? I'm not sure. In any case, thank you for letting me share my glitch. Could this be a glitch? Or am I just crazy? This might sound a bit silly, but it honestly gave me chills when it happened, and I can't stop thinking about it. A while back, I ordered a pack of 4 replacement earrings for my tragus piercing. And for anyone who doesn't know, the tragus is the little piece of cartilage shaped like a crescent moon in your ear. These earrings are small metal bars with a tiny diamond on the front and a backing. When the package arrived, I took one out, I put it in my tragus piercing, and then I put the remaining 3 earrings back in their little pack. I carefully placed the pack inside my jewelry box upstairs, and it was just another regular day, and I didn't think much about it. One day, after work, I came home feeling tired, as usual. I set my keys down on the entryway table, and that's when I noticed it. A tiny tragus earring just lying there on the table. I live alone, so I immediately started to feel uneasy. I reached up and I checked my ear to make sure that I hadn't somehow lost the one that I was wearing, but it was still there, securely in place. Perplexed, I went upstairs to check my jewelry box, wondering if I had somehow dropped one without realizing it. But when I opened the box, the pack of 3 earrings was still intact. None were missing. I took out the pack to inspect it more closely, still trying to make sense of it. Just as I was examining it, the lone earring slipped from my fingers, fell to the floor, and rolled under my couch. I didn't feel like crawling around and digging it out, so I just left it there. After all, I had 3 other ones, and I figured it wasn't worth the hassle. I chalked it up to one of those weird little moments and moved on, though the whole thing still left me feeling oddly unsettled. Months passed, probably 5 or 6 if I had to guess, and I had completely forgotten about that strange little incident. One evening, after another long day at work, I walked into my house, set my keys on the same entryway table, and froze. There it was. The exact same Tragus earring bar sitting in the same spot on the table. My first thought was, okay, maybe I had accidentally retrieved it from under the couch without remembering. But no, that didn't make any sense. I would have noticed doing that. Plus, why would I put it back on the entryway table? I reached up to feel my ear again, and yeah, the piercing was still there. I hurried upstairs to check my jewelry box, and sure enough, all 3 extras were still safely tucked inside. I picked up the earring from the table, my heart racing, trying to convince myself that maybe I had somehow overlooked it all this time. But deep down, I knew that didn't add up. I was 1000% sure that I had left it under the couch months ago. Could this be a glitch in the Matrix? Or something else? I still can't figure it out, and every time I think about it, I get that eerie, spine-tingling feeling all over again. A weird momentary glitch, or what I call object permanence gremlins. One day, I experienced what can only be described as a glitch in the Matrix. I was heading to the post office, and before leaving the house, I slid my heavy metal credit card into the pocket of my pajama pants. I remember doing this clearly. I remember the weight of the card, and the cold metal against my hand, and the deliberate motion of putting it into my pocket. I even felt the card there as I drove. When I arrived at the post office, I instinctively reached into my pocket to retrieve the card, but it wasn't there. I checked again, and nothing. I emptied my pocket, I ran my hand along the whole fabric, and I patted down my entire outfit. Still nothing. Puzzled, I returned to my car and I searched the seats, the floor, and even the center console, thinking that maybe I had somehow dropped it or misplaced it on the way. But no luck. By this point, I figured I must have left the card at home, even though I was sure that I had felt it during the drive. Frustrated, but resigned, I drove the short distance back to my house, my mind replaying the moment that I had placed the card in my pocket, trying to convince myself that I had somehow imagined it. When I parked, I got out of the car and I stood up to walk into my house, and then I froze. I could feel the card in my pocket. I felt it almost as soon as I stood up. The familiar heaviness and the unmistakable outline of the metal card pressing against my leg. I reached into my pocket, and I felt it then. It was sitting exactly where it should have been all along. My stomach dropped, and I stood there, rooted in place, trying to make sense of what just happened. I checked and rechecked my pocket again, even though I knew it was impossible to miss the card. The pocket wasn't even deep enough to lose it, and the weight of the card made it impossible not to notice. There was no way that it could have been caught in the fabric or overlooked during my earlier searches, and I'm certain that I didn't put it back in my pocket during the drive home. I was too focused on the mystery of where it had gone to even consider doing that. This isn't the first time something like this has happened to me either. Over the years, I've noticed small, inexplicable events that make me question reality. I even have a name for it. I call them gremlins. It's as if these little mischievous forces mess with me just to make me feel crazy. They'll hide things in plain sight, move objects around, or make me doubt my own memory. This day at the post office was just another instance in a long line of strange occurrences that I can't explain. I've tried to rationalize it 100 different ways since then, but no explanation feels satisfying. The entire sequence of events just defies logic. It was as if reality had momentarily bent or shifted, and the card had disappeared into some unknown void, only to reappear when I least expected it. To this day, I can't explain what happened. All I know is that for those brief, surreal moments, it felt like I had stepped outside the normal rules of the universe. How did those dots get there, and who put them there? I am extremely freaked out right now, and so is my family, so I'll try to keep this short. I woke up at 6:30 this morning, and my mom woke up at around the same time. She went to the upstairs bathroom first for a few minutes, and then I went in at around 6:37 or so. Nothing had been out of the ordinary up until this point. When I stepped into the bathroom, I noticed black dots everywhere on the rug and on the floor and all around the sink, and even 2 of them on the toilet. I honestly thought it was something my mom did, but she said she didn't see any of those dots when she walked in before me. Then we both realized that neither of us did it. These dots were scattered across the whole bathroom just faintly, and they were only visible on the rug. They were also placed in a way that made it look like someone had made them intentionally. What's even weirder is that the dots looked exactly like little mascara dots. I tested it. I took my mascara wand, made a dot on some toilet paper, and it matched the dots on the floor perfectly in both size and shape. The mascara was also still up on the shelf, so I'm pretty sure it wasn't accidental. And the part that kind of scares me the most? The dots were completely dry. The time gap between when my mom went in, didn't see the dots, and when I went in to see the dots was only about 7 minutes if I recall, so I don't know how they could have dried so fast. I also checked the mascara tube, and there's nothing particularly odd about it. I don't think this is sleep-related or anything like that. We also don't have a motion camera, so there's no way of tracking what happened. The only thing I can think of is that there's a roof window above the bathroom, but it was closed tight, so I don't think that's the issue. I mean, I don't think anything could have leaked in from it from above. Please, help me and my mom find any logical explanation for this. I've never had anything happen like this before. This next story is called Something in My Apartment, and it's from another podcast host named Christy from the Campfires and Creepy Things podcast. I'll leave a link to their show in the timestamps. This happened years ago in an apartment that I used to live in, and maybe someone can tell me what we were dealing with. Way back in 2000, when we first got married, my husband and I lived in an apartment in Somerville, South Carolina. At first, nothing was strange about it, but soon after we moved in, we adopted a cat, and soon after that, we adopted another one. We had the second bedroom set up as a cat room, where we put the litter box, their food, and their water dishes. They also had a cat tower and their other toys. They were pretty rambunctious, as cats are, of course. So at night, we would put them in their room while we slept, so we wouldn't wake up to the apartment being totally destroyed. At night, we would hear this metallic tapping sound coming from their room. The wall behind our headboard was shared with that room, so just on the other side of that wall. It would happen almost every night, and would go on until we fell asleep. And it only happened at night, never during the day. We couldn't figure it out, so we were joking that they were just building a spaceship and planning their escape. We also chalked up random missing items to their imagined spaceship. After a while, we started letting the cats roam the apartment at night, although all of their stuff stayed in that extra bedroom. One night, as we were trying to get to sleep, we heard a crash in the kitchen. We were in the habit of leaving the dishes on a towel on the counter to dry overnight, so we knew that one of the cats just knocked them down. That was the sound, crashing dishes. It was late, and it didn't sound like anything actually broke, so we just groaned and said we'd deal with it in the morning. The next morning, however, we got up and there was nothing in the kitchen or anywhere else in the apartment. We had apparently put the dishes away the night before, so we had no idea what that crashing sound was. The creepiest thing happened one night when we were watching TV in the living room. The cats were playing, chasing each other and hiding and jumping out at each other. We were on the couch, and there was a love seat about 3 feet away from the wall. The cats stopped, one on each end of the love seat, both staring at a spot just under the window. At first, we assumed they were about to pounce on each other, but after a while, we started paying attention and realized that they were both completely stiff, which isn't, particularly unusual for that kind of play. And we noticed that they couldn't even see each other, nor were they trying to. We got up and my husband went to one side and nudged the cat with his foot, but she didn't budge. A little creeped out, I went to the other side and picked up the other cat, thinking that this would break his concentration. But it didn't. He stayed completely stiff in my arms, not taking his eyes off of that spot. Even his tail was like a stiff rod. My husband kicked his foot through the air in the spot that they were staring at, and suddenly, both of the cats started relaxing. The one in my arms just went almost limp in a way, and then jumped to the ground and just wandered off like nothing had happened. Same with the other one. Another thing that had nothing to do with the cats, and we didn't even talk about this until years later, is that we were both freaked out in the bedroom. Sometimes when I was trying to sleep, I would close my eyes and see a dark figure standing near the foot of our bed. It was against the opposite wall and slightly off to one side, but it was always in that same spot. It wasn't tall, maybe 4 feet, but it was solid and not shadowy. When I opened my eyes, it wasn't there, but when I would close them, the figure would reappear. Other times, I would come home from work in the morning. I worked nights and he worked days, and I would go into the bedroom to change and just not be able to stay in there. This was daytime, not like pre-dawn hours, and sometimes it was fine, and I would just change and go to bed. But other times, I just felt really uncomfortable and I didn't want to stay in there. I just told myself that, hey, I wasn't tired yet, and I went to watch TV in the living room and slept on the couch until the afternoon. Of course, I didn't say anything about this to my husband because I was a grown woman, apparently too afraid of being alone to sleep in my bed. I felt ridiculous and I just passed it off as I fell asleep watching TV. And when I came home, sometimes to find my husband asleep on the couch, I just assumed that he had legitimately passed out while watching TV. Years later, after we had moved a few times, we were watching some ghost show or something else, and there was a story about a Native American legend in the area which described this thing that I remember seeing in my mind. I don't remember anything else about what they were saying, because both my husband and I were leaning forward, pointing at the TV, saying, "I saw that." We had never mentioned it to each other, but we both saw the same thing on those nights, and both of us could only see it with our eyes closed. He also told me that when I found him sleeping on the couch, it wasn't because he passed out. It was because, like me, at certain times, he felt like there was something in the bedroom with him, and he just couldn't stay in there. One last point. The hall leading from the living room to the back where the bedrooms and the bathrooms were had a turn which blocked any light from the front rooms. So it was always pretty dark back there. When we watched TV at night, anytime one of us would go to the bathroom, our male cat would scurry out of wherever he was hiding and go with us. While we were in there, we could hear him scratching around in the litter box, so we knew what he was doing. He would usually be waiting at the bathroom door when we came out to walk back with us. On the occasions that we were out before him, he would stand in the bedroom doorway and just meow until one of us came to escort him back. After we moved, he was never like that again. So, does anyone know what this entity could have been? I've searched online, but I can't find any reference to anything like that in the area. According to the show that we were watching, it's an evil entity and it's known to local native people. Unfortunately, I don't remember most of the show because we got sidetracked comparing notes about our own experiences and how eerily similar they were to each other. I think I may have died after my birthday. This person starts their story off with, "First things first, keep the temperature in the car a little lower and make sure you're well rested before driving. Please." As you might guess, this is one of those car accident stories, but I really wanted to share my experience. It was the day after my birthday, and I had spent it with my girlfriend at her place. But despite the early hour, I didn't feel tired at all. It was a really cold day, about negative 5 degrees Celsius or 23 degrees Fahrenheit. So I turned the heater in my car almost all the way up, trying to stay warm. Everything seemed to be going smoothly. Then, out of nowhere, something really strange happened. I'm not sure if I dozed off for a second or experienced a micro sleep, but one moment I was driving normally, and the next I was much farther down the road. Suddenly, I was about 2 meters away from hitting a car in the left lane. In the chaos, I lost my left side mirror. I screamed like a little girl and slammed on the brakes, panicking. My first instinct was to drive away, but I quickly changed my mind. I turned the car around, and I went back to check on the situation. When I got back, I saw a man sitting in the damaged car. I have this clear, vivid memory of the car right in front of me, a white sedan, and the driver looked to be in his mid-30s. I drove up to him, and he asked me what the hell I was doing. I apologized, trying to stay calm, and told him that I would cover the cost of any damages. Strangely, even though I had just been through a near accident, I felt almost detached, like I was in a scripted scene from a show or a movie. I even made a light-hearted comment saying, "Sorry, mate, I didn't know what happened." The man seemed very shaken, but he accepted my offer to pay for the damages. After that, I just moved on with my life. I didn't tell my parents about the incident right away. I did tell my closest friends though, but they acted really weird about it. They kept questioning why I went back to the guy instead of just driving away. Only my girlfriend seemed to have a rational conversation with me about it. Then, things started feeling differently. Subtly, at first, but enough to catch my attention. For example, my dad looks noticeably younger than I remember. Even younger than he looked 7 years ago. It's really bizarre. I also noticed that I had been playing a game called Darkest Dungeon in the past week, but the thing is, I had completely forgotten that I even owned that game. It was just there in my library, as if I had been playing it regularly, with hours logged. But the weirdest part is that people around me seem to know a different version of me. For instance, I don't remember winning a lot of money at the casino, but my friends can recall it pretty clearly, even though I supposedly wasted the winnings. I also don't remember meeting my friends and my girlfriend at a certain spot several times, but they insist that I was there and even share detailed stories involving me that I genuinely have no memory of. I've had near-death experiences before, but this one feels different. Almost uncanny. The strangest thing is that I feel like I look slightly different than I remember. My voice sounds deeper to me now, but when I asked people about it, they said I've always sounded like this, even though I've been more of a high-pitched squeaker my whole life. It's been over a month since the incident, and I've talked to many people about the accident itself, but I've never shared the strange changes that I've noticed. I try to ignore it, but sometimes I just feel really isolated. Like my past has been altered just to avoid that car crash. There's somebody in the comments that emphasizes investigating the original scene of the incident and speaking to the witness again in case more details emerge. They also suspect an unnoticed head injury, possibly masked by shock or stress, and they also mention that sleep deprivation can also severely distort perception. OP responds that they frequently drive the road in question, and the only notable detail being many dead animals near the forest. They agree that seeking medical evaluation, like tests for head injury or even a possible tumor, is a good idea, and plan to report back with any results. Also, I read through, I think, all the comments, and the most surprising thing to me, and hopefully to you too listening, is that not a single person mentioned that they almost drove away, and even the OP's friends were wondering why he went back as well, to check on the guy. We can talk about quantum immortality and glitches in the Matrix all day, and we do, but that right there is the strangest part to me. Stuffed animal dropped out of thin air. I think this is the right place for this, although it has some crossover with other slightly paranormal experiences that we've had in our house. Last night, my wife and I were going to sleep a few minutes past midnight. We have no kids, no pets, and we're the only people in the house. We washed our bed sheets and duvet earlier in the evening and had put a fresh bedding on right before bed. My wife has a stuffed animal possum from when she was younger named Puddin' Pop. He usually is just plopped down at the end of the bed or sometimes down on the floor if he rolls off. Occasionally, she'll cuddle up with it when we're going to sleep. While falling asleep, we're laying there talking. I'm spooning with her with my arm over her, with my arm and head the only parts of my body outside of the covers. As our conversation is trailing off and we're getting sleepy, I say something like, "Where's Puddin' Pop? Did we put him back on the bed after we made it?" She just responds that she isn't sure, and then we're quiet for a few minutes. Maybe 3 minutes go by, and Puddin' Pop suddenly lands on my arm, which is slung over my wife as we're all cuddled up. He's stuffed with the material inside Beanie Babies, and he makes this distinct plop sound like if you were to drop a Beanie Baby down on a table. It's a very distinct and audible noise. Our eyes both shoot open immediately. "Did you just drop Puddin' Pop down on me somehow?" My wife says, "No, how could I have?" And she was completely under the covers other than her head. Now she's, understandably, freaked out. The stuffed animal came down on me hard enough for her to feel it through the covers as we both jolted up. We have no bedside table by the bed, nothing at all that it could have fallen off of. Our bed is essentially just against the wall in the middle of the room. I have no real explanation of where he came from, how he dropped down on top of us, or anything. It's just very bizarre, and we found it very hard to fall asleep for the next hour. Did I just see an alternate version of myself? I need to get this off my chest because it's seriously freaking me out and no one believes me. 2 weeks ago, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing. It was a message from a friend that I hadn't spoken to in over a year. He asked me if I wanted to meet up for pizza, and I said, "Yeah, sure." This was on a Saturday. At first, I didn't think too much about it, but something about the situation kind of felt strange to me. I had this weird sense of déjà vu, like I'd been through this exact moment before. I tried to brush it off because déjà vu happens sometimes, right? But still, I couldn't shake this odd feeling in the pit of my stomach. I went about my usual morning routine, trying to ignore the weird vibe that I was feeling. I made my way to the kitchen, still half asleep, and I opened the fridge to grab some eggs. As I reached for the egg box, I noticed something strange about it. The label didn't look quite right. The colors seemed to be slightly faded and a little bit off, like it was a weird, low-quality version of the usual label. It was almost as if someone had taken the original image and swapped it out with a poorly edited copy. I paused for a second, just kind of staring at it. I even took a closer look to make sure I wasn't imagining things. But no. Something about this was definitely wrong. I didn't dwell on it for too long, though. I guess I just chalked it up to being tired and maybe overthinking. Later that day, I got into my car to meet up with my friend for pizza. As I was driving, I couldn't shake that uneasy feeling. I tried to distract myself by listening to music, hoping that it would snap me out of it. Eventually, I pulled up to a red light, still a little on edge. And then it happened. The car that pulled up next to me felt oddly familiar. I glanced over, and for a split second, I saw the person driving, and it was me. And I don't mean someone who just looked like me, it was actually me. Not a twin, not a doppelganger. It was just me, but slightly different. He was wearing different clothes and had a different expression on his face. I couldn't believe it. I just sat there, staring, not blinking for what felt like over 30 seconds. My mind was racing, trying to process what I was seeing. I was so stunned that I almost drove off the road. I quickly looked back at the road to make sure that I wasn't about to crash, and when I glanced back at the car next to me, it was gone. Not just the person, but the entire car had disappeared. Panicked, I pulled over to a bus stop and just sat there, trying to catch my breath. I was questioning everything. Had I fallen asleep at the wheel? Was I hallucinating? I started to check my pulse just to make sure that I was awake and alert, but everything seemed normal. I was fully conscious, completely aware of my surroundings. And just to clarify, I wasn't drunk or high or anything like that. I don't do drugs, and I don't drink because I have epilepsy. I'm in good health, I eat well, and I'm a personal trainer by trade. I've always prided myself on taking care of my body and my mind, so this made even less sense. I can't get this experience out of my head. It's stressing me out, and I really don't know what to make of it. Was it really some kind of glitch in my reality? Did I somehow see an alternate version of myself? I've never experienced anything like this before, and I just need to know if I'm alone in this. If anyone's had a similar experience, please let me know. I really need to hear from others who might understand what happened. Lost in Walmart. So back during COVID, maybe 2022, I was with my family on our bi-weekly grocery trip. We live a half hour from town, so we make a night of shopping. We go out to dinner and all of that. Anyway, we were at our last stop of the night, Walmart. My mom always takes her time in the produce section, so my younger sister and I decide to look at the clothes while we wait. We stay there for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and we realize that we still haven't seen our parents come around to go to the cash registers. We'd be able to see this being that the clothing section is right in front of the cash registers in this Walmart. We decide to go look for them and see how much longer they'll be, as we're both getting tired of shopping since it's now close to 10 p.m. So we go to the produce section, where they still should be, and we don't find them. So we backtrack through the aisles, thinking they forgot something and just headed back to get it. This normally works. It's a big store, but we've been coming to this location since I was a baby, so we know it by heart. We do a full lap around the store, but we still can't find them. There aren't that many people in the store, mostly because of how late it is, so we should have no problem picking them out. We start our second lap. Maybe they were in between aisles and we missed them on the first time, right? Well, then we start to notice hearing a foreign language. People around us are speaking something other than English, and this is very uncommon for the area. It's a small town, and though it's close to Ottawa in Canada, not many tourists stop there because there isn't really anything for them to do. We started noticing that not a single person was speaking English. Every person, every family we passed was speaking something that we didn't understand. So as we walk, My sister and I are nervously joking about the fact that we can't understand a single person that we've passed in the last 10 minutes. We finish our second lap, and by this point, we're getting worried that they've already left the store. But as we near the produce section for now a third time, we finally find them. They were basically right where we left them originally. My sister and I run up to my parents, happy to finally see some familiar faces, also mentioning how we couldn't find them for the longest time. Well, my mom says that they've been in the produce section the whole time. But I swear, we checked that produce section twice, and they weren't there. Even weirder, once we finally found them, it seemed like everyone started to speak English again. I didn't hear another foreign language that night. So either my parents are just really good at hiding in plain sight, and there was some sort of foreign tour bus that happened to pull into the small town Walmart at 10 p.m., or something really weird actually did happen. This person includes an edit that adds, and just to be clear, the foreign language that we heard was not French. We live close to the Quebec border and are exposed to French pretty often. I also dabble in language learning, so it wasn't German, or Russian, or Spanish, or Italian either. It literally sounded like English gibberish, close enough to sound familiar, but not a single distinguishable word. I'd say I was having a stroke if my sister wasn't experiencing the exact same thing with me. And as quickly as it was there, it was gone. Kind of like the flip of a switch. A book came to find me. When I was a young adult, I moved 4 hours away from home. One day, I started having intrusive thoughts of, I need to learn more about Egyptian cat goddesses. The thought would pop up out of nowhere during the day, and this went on for several weeks. Around this time, I had a trip planned to go visit my family for the weekend. The morning after I arrived, I noticed a book on their kitchen table. It was a book about Sekhmet, which is an Egyptian cat goddess. I thought it was odd because I couldn't imagine who would have been reading that. I don't think anybody in my family has any interest in that subject. At the end of the weekend, before I left, I asked whose book that was and if I could borrow it. They said that they thought it was my book and that the book wasn't there before I came to visit. This was 15 years ago, and I've never forgotten about it. The book has also since disappeared from my home, even though I know I had it up until very recently, and I've looked everywhere for it. This person includes an edit that adds, I just found the book again. Last time I scoured my house with no luck, but this time I found it in under a minute, in a place that should have been very easy to see. An inquisitive person in the comments asks if the OP has learned anything since reading the book, and if her intrusive thoughts were ever satisfied. OP responds with, yes, of course. I've learned all about the different kinds of goddesses and queens from that era, and different meditation techniques as well. I was either sleepwalking or not alone, and I don't know which one is scarier. I didn't get much sleep the night before, and I had been out on the boat for half of the day, so I was feeling completely exhausted. That might explain what happened, but honestly, I'm not so sure. Here's what went down. I went to bed early, probably around 8 or 9 p.m., because I was just wiped out. Before falling asleep, I was watching videos on my phone, just winding down. As part of my usual routine, I locked the door to my room to make sure that no one would disturb me while I slept, and eventually, I drifted off. Suddenly, around 3 a.m., I was jolted awake by the loudest noise I've ever heard. The smoke alarm was going off, blaring like crazy. Beep, beep, beep. I was still groggy and grumpy from being woken up so abruptly, but my first thought was that maybe something had caught on fire in my room. I needed light, so I instinctively reached for my phone, but it wasn't there. I started feeling around my entire bed, under the pillows, in the sheets, but nothing. Maybe I kicked it off? No, not on the floor. I checked the nightstand too, and still nothing. Now, I'm not someone who's constantly attached to my phone, but waking up to that alarm had me desperate to find it. I was getting more frustrated and confused. Finally, I decided to grab my old phone from the drawer and boot it up so I can use the Find My iPhone feature. I activated the ring alarm on my current phone, and to my surprise, it wasn't in my room. That was weird. I have a pretty strict routine when it comes to me and my stuff. I always know where my phone is. I walked around the house, still half asleep and bewildered, and finally found it sitting on the couch in another part of the house. Now, if you're still with me, you might be thinking, okay, what's the big deal? Well, I've never been known to sleepwalk, at least not according to anyone that I've lived with. Plus, my bedroom door was locked when I went to sleep, and I know that I was watching videos before I drifted off, like I do every night. Somehow, my phone made its way across the house while I was sleeping, and it had smudge marks and greasy prints all over it. On top of that, the fire alarm randomly went off at 3 a.m. without any apparent reason. My girlfriend had been texting and even called me once, which would normally wake me up. And when I checked the Ring camera footage, it just showed my younger sister's boyfriend arriving at around midnight, but the front door was already wide open when he walked up. I'm guessing my sister could have been outside, just out of view. Maybe he was vaping or doing something that set off the smoke alarm. He's not 21 yet, so I don't know, maybe he might have been trying to hide it. Maybe someone picked the lock to my room and snooped around while I was asleep. It's just strange because I never sit on the couch or leave my phone there. Like, ever. Honestly, now it's late, and I'm just trying to make sense of it. Sorry if this sounds confusing or rambling. It's now 4 a.m., and I'm going back to sleep. Hopefully, I can figure this out in the morning. Two kids vanished. I need to get this off my chest because it's been bugging me ever since it happened. Last month, I was outside waiting for the bus to go to my training session. It was one of those times when the streets were really quiet and hardly anyone was out and about. The bus schedules were pretty sparse during that hour, so I knew the bus would be mostly empty. I was just standing there, scrolling through my phone, when finally a bus pulled up to the stop. There were about 5 or 6 other people waiting with me. Since the bus was pretty empty, I figured we'd all have plenty of space once we got in. In my country, you have to pay the driver when you board, so I was at the end of the line, waiting my turn as the others went ahead and paid. While I was standing there, I glanced through the bus windows to get a sense of how crowded it actually was. To my surprise, I only saw 2 kids inside. They were sitting towards the front, across from each other, but they both looked a little bit, I don't know, odd. One of them was wearing what looked like a Nike Tech tracksuit and was staring out the window, completely zoned out. The other was leaning on the first one's shoulder, clearly asleep, wearing a green coat. The weird thing was, I couldn't really see their faces. They were positioned in a way that both of their faces were turned away from me. I remember thinking it was a bit strange, but quickly brushed it off. Maybe they were just brothers, or close friends. Once it was my turn, I paid the driver, I stepped onto the bus, and I moved towards the back to find a seat. The bus wasn't entirely empty, but it was spacious enough that I could sit comfortably without being too close to anybody else. As I settled in, I couldn't help but glance back at the two kids, and that's when my heart nearly stopped. They were gone. I did a double take, looking back and forth, but they had completely vanished. I felt a chill run down my spine in that moment, and I could feel goosebumps prickling on my arms. I leaned forward, trying to see if they had just moved to another seat or something, but no, there was no sign of them anywhere. Now, let me be clear. The bus never stopped again after I got on, and neither the middle nor the back doors had opened. There was no possible way that they could have just slipped out without me noticing. I even craned my neck to check the far corners in the seats, but it was like they had just completely disappeared into thin air. I was sitting there, frozen, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My mind was racing. Had I just imagined these two kids? No, I was sure that I saw them, and I could clearly remember their clothes and how one was sleeping on the other's shoulder. I could still see that image in my head clear as day. I felt uneasy for the entire ride, glancing around occasionally to see if they would reappear, but of course they never did. To this day, I still don't know what I saw. Maybe it was a glitch in the Matrix, or just some weird visual trick, but I can't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I just know that the moment I realized they were gone, I felt a cold wave of fear wash over me, like I had seen something I wasn't supposed to. I still get chills just thinking about it. Somebody replied to the story asking, "Did anyone else on the bus notice their presence before they vanished, like you?" And the OP responds with, "That's actually a good question, but I don't think anybody else noticed because nobody was reacting the same way that I was." Is this the weirdest time slip ever? I had to write this down because I can't stop thinking about what happened this morning. I experienced not one, but two weird time glitches at the grocery store, and it's been bugging me all day. It started when I was making my way down one of the aisles, just doing my usual grocery run. As I walked toward the back of the store, I noticed a store employee walking slowly in the opposite direction, heading toward the front. We passed each other about halfway down the aisle, nothing out of the ordinary. I didn't stop or look back, I just kept moving. But when I reached the end of the aisle and stepped out into the next one, I was totally caught off guard. That same employee who I had just passed heading to the front was now coming out from the back of the store, walking towards me. My mind couldn't process it. I had just seen her going in the opposite direction. It was as if she had somehow looped around or teleported. I paused for a second, wondering if I was mistaken, but it was absolutely the same person. Same uniform, same walk, same hairstyle. all of it. I tried to brush it off and continue shopping, telling myself that maybe I just got confused or something. Maybe she was just really quick, though I know I didn't believe that. I couldn't shake the weird feeling that something was off, but I just focused on finishing my shopping. Eventually, I made my way to the checkout. I went through the self-checkout, I paid for my stuff, and was heading towards the exit when I noticed another odd situation. There was this girl at the self-checkout behind me who caught my attention because she looked kind of unusual. Maybe it was her clothes or something, I'm not really sure. As I left the checkout area, she was just starting to scan her items. I kept walking towards the exit, halfway down the aisle at the front of the store, when suddenly, I noticed the same girl that was behind me scanning her items when I finished, leaving the store, way ahead of me. I had just seen her starting to check out, and there's no way that she could have finished, paid, and walked all of the way out that quickly. It was like she had somehow skipped forward, getting from one point to another without me noticing. At this point, I was feeling pretty uneasy. I didn't want to make a scene or act weird, but my mind was racing. I've experienced time glitches before, but never this obvious or this back-to-back. Usually, it's more subtle, like a clock being off or just a quick moment of confusion, but this was very different. It was undeniable and too strange to just ignore. I've spent most of the day trying to come up with some rational explanation. Maybe I just got distracted or was more tired than I realized. But no matter how I look at it, it still doesn't make sense. I keep replaying it in my mind, and every time I do, it still feels like time just skipped or looped in some way. I'm writing this down, not only to get it off of my chest, but to ask if anyone here has experienced anything similar. I keep wondering if maybe it's just me, or if something weird is happening to other people as well. Am I going crazy, or did a McDonald's cup just materialize? I honestly feel like I'm losing my mind right now. Last week, my husband and I had McDonald's, but that was a full week ago. Since then, I've cleaned the house multiple times and taken out the trash. Earlier tonight, I did a thorough tidying up to make sure the house was feeling cozy. I made sure that everything was in its place, and I know for a fact that there wasn't any fast food trash lying around. The place was spotless. Fast forward to tonight, my husband and I sat down to watch the latest episode of House of the Dragon. After that, we decided to check out the Making of miniseries. My husband eventually dozed off on the couch while I stayed up a bit longer. After a while, I went upstairs to do some drawing. When I started to feel sleepy, I headed back downstairs to wake up my husband. As I approached the coffee table, I subconsciously picked up a McDonald's cup that was just sitting there. And that's when it hit me. There wasn't a McDonald's cup on that table earlier. I had just cleaned that entire room, and I was positive that it wasn't there before I went upstairs. My husband was still dead asleep on the couch, so it wasn't like he had gotten up and brought it in while I was upstairs. I thought maybe he had ordered something from DoorDash without me noticing, but when I checked the Ring footage, it showed no deliveries, no visitors, nothing. There was no indication that anyone had come in or out of the house besides us much earlier in the day. When I woke up my husband and told him about the cup, he just looked at me like I was crazy. I kept insisting that it wasn't there before, but he shrugged it off, saying I must be mistaken. But I know I'm not. I'm absolutely certain that that table was clean when I went upstairs. There is no rational explanation for where that cup came from, and it's really freaking me out. I feel like I'm questioning my own memory, my perception, everything. How could a cup just appear out of nowhere? I've been trying to come up with a logical explanation, but nothing makes sense. It's like reality just shifted for a moment and I'm the only one who noticed. Has anyone else ever experienced anything like this? I really need to know that I'm not the only one. This next story is going to feel a little different than what you're used to, but I hope you listen, and I hope you let me know if you like it, because if you do, I'll do more. And keep in mind, just like every other glitch story I've read on this channel since the beginning, it's allegedly true. It was July of 1975 in Bermuda. If you've never been, Bermuda is a small island territory in the Atlantic Ocean, known for its pink sand beaches and vibrant, tight-knit communities. In the capital city of Hamilton, a pair of identical twin brothers lived a seemingly ordinary life. These twins, whose names unfortunately have been lost to history, were known to be inseparable. They shared nearly everything. They shared a sense of humor, the same hobbies, and even their love of riding their shared moped around town. Now, when you think of riding a moped in Bermuda, it makes sense. The island is relatively small, and mopeds are a common way to get around, especially for locals. It's practical, it's easy, and it just becomes a part of daily life. For these twins, that shared moped would become the focal point of a tragedy that still baffles people to this day. One sunny afternoon, one of the twins took the moped out for a ride. Just a routine trip, nothing unusual. As he made his way through Hamilton, something went horribly wrong. A taxi, driving down the same road, collided with him. The impact was fatal, and the twin was killed instantly on the spot. For the surviving brother, this was beyond devastating. They had done everything together their entire lives, and now his twin, his mirror image, was gone. It's impossible to understand that kind of loss unless you've been through it. He was left grappling with the grief of losing not just a sibling, but a literal part of himself. And then, the first layer of strangeness appeared. The taxi driver, a local man who knew the area well, had been working that route for years. The passenger in the taxi was a regular too. Both were traumatized by the accident, but it was ultimately ruled as just that. An accident. A tragic, unfortunate one, but it wouldn't be the last time. Exactly 1 year later, the surviving twin was still trying to move on. Some say he was still mourning, still trying to cope with the loss, and maybe that's why he took the same moped out for a ride that day. Maybe it was his way of holding on to a piece of his brother's memory. He traveled down the same road in Hamilton. Maybe it was familiar. Maybe it just felt comforting in the moment. But as he rode, something happened that would cement this story as one of the strangest, most tragic coincidences ever recorded. A taxi came down the road, just like the year before. The twin, unaware of the vehicle approaching, didn't have time to react. The taxi struck him, and the impact, fatal. Here's the part that defies logic. It was the same taxi, driven by the same man, carrying the same passenger. Take a moment to process that. 1 year apart, on the same moped, on the same road, the same driver with the same passenger hit the surviving twin in an almost identical accident. How could that even be possible? This story circulated in Bermuda ever since, and people have tried to explain it in countless ways. Some say that it's fate, like an eerie, almost poetic conclusion to the twins' story. Others think it was just an astronomical coincidence. You know, like the kind of thing that happens once in a billion lifetimes. From a purely statistical perspective, the odds of this happening are almost incalculable. You would need to consider the frequency of moped use, the specific route, the likelihood of the same driver and the same passenger being present 1 year apart. You could try to calculate it, but the result would be so small, it would be practically impossible. And yet, it happened. The driver, understandably, was deeply affected, killing a young man. You find yourself in the exact same situation with his identical twin. In the exact same situation with his identical twin. He was reportedly haunted by the coincidence, struggling with guilt despite the accidents being deemed unavoidable and accidental both times. The passenger too was shaken. Witnessing the same tragedy twice is enough to make anyone question reality. The people of Bermuda talked about the incident for years, and it's still considered one of the island's most chilling stories. But what does it mean? Was it fate? Was it a glitch in reality? Or just one of those rare occurrences that seem to defy logic? Sometimes we crave explanations for stories like this because they challenge our understanding of the world. We want to believe that there's a pattern or a reason to things. Maybe it's human nature to look for order in the chaos. But in this case, I think the only thing we're left with is the unsettling truth that life can sometimes align in the most strangest, most tragic ways. Is my mind playing tricks on me, or did someone enter my baby's room? This just happened not even 20 minutes ago, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. It was a completely ordinary evening. I had just put the baby down in his bassinet in our bedroom. The little guy was finally settled, and I figured it was a good time to step away for a moment. I headed down the hall to the living room to chat with my boyfriend. We talked for a bit, nothing out of the ordinary, and after a few minutes, I made my way back toward the bedroom. As I was walking down the hall, I heard the baby start to cry. I knew he'd be fine for a minute, and since the bathroom is right next to the bedroom, I decided to quickly pop in there before going to check on him. Figured I'd be in and out in no time. While I was in the bathroom, I clearly heard my boyfriend's footsteps coming down the hall. It was unmistakable. His distinct, familiar stride. I hear it all day. Then, I heard the bedroom door open and close, and I even heard his voice, calmly and soothingly saying, "Hey baby, Daddy's got you. It's okay." And just like that, I heard the baby stop crying. It was such a relief to hear the baby calm down, and I felt grateful that my boyfriend had stepped in. When I finished up in the bathroom, I pushed open the bedroom door, fully expecting to see my boyfriend standing there holding our baby. But when I walked in, I froze. The baby was still in his bassinet, completely alone. And the moment my hand touched the doorknob, he started crying again, as if he'd never stopped. My heart started to pound, and I looked around the room, trying to make sense of what I had just experienced. Where was my boyfriend? I ran quickly back down the hall to the living room, and there he was, exactly where I had left him. He hadn't moved, he hadn't gone to the bedroom, he was just there the whole time. I asked him if he had gotten up to go check on the baby, but he just gave me this confused look and said no. My first instinct was to think that maybe I'd had some sort of auditory hallucination, like I was hearing things. It's the only thing that makes any logical sense, but the part that's really getting to me is that the baby actually stopped crying for a minute. That wasn't just in my head. The baby really did quiet down, just as if he'd been comforted. I've never experienced anything like this before, and it's honestly so unnerving. I'm trying not to overthink it, but it's hard not to. How do I explain those footsteps? Hearing the door opening and closing, and hearing my boyfriend's voice, only to find the baby completely alone. All I know is that it was strange, really strange, and I can't shake the feeling that something just wasn't right. Was that massive boulder really a UFO? I work with outdoor events, and part of my job is finding unique venues to host them. One day, a friend of mine mentioned that he knew of a great spot, so 3 of us climbed into the car and drove out to check it out. The place was about 100 kilometers from our city, so it wasn't a quick trip, but we were up for the adventure. When we finally arrived, I was impressed. It was a quarry right next to a river, giving it this rugged, scenic vibe. The quarry looked decommissioned or unused for a while. The landscape looked perfect for the event, and I started imagining how we could set everything up. But then I saw it. A massive rock right in the middle of where I would have put the main dance floor. And when I say massive, I mean it was bigger than an absolutely huge Winnebago. This rock wasn't just an inconvenience for us, it was a showstopper. We couldn't help but laugh about it though, joking that the only way to make this space usable would be to blow up the rock and haul it away. It was a ridiculous idea, but we were also half serious at the same time. That rock was a problem, and we couldn't stop talking about it on the drive back. Fast forward about 1 year, and I was in desperate need of a venue for an upcoming event. I remembered the quarry and thought maybe I could work something out. I called up the farmer who owned the place and arranged to meet him there. I even mentioned our funny idea about blowing up the rock, and he seemed cool with it, saying that he knew someone with a demolition license who might be able to help out. I got to the quarry a bit early, wanting to check out the site before the farmer arrived. As I pulled in, I couldn't believe my eyes. The giant rock, the one that dominated the floor space, was completely gone. I walked around, convinced that maybe it had been blown up already or moved, but there were no marks on the ground. No signs of any recent blasting or even erosion. It was like the rock had never existed in the first place. And when the farmer finally arrived, I immediately asked if he had blown up the rock or somehow moved it, and he just stared at me, confused. "What rock?" he asked, and I started describing it. I said the huge, RV-sized boulder that had been right across the dance floor area. But the more I talked, the more confused he looked. He then told me something that made my stomach drop. He said that he and his friends had been barbecuing in that exact spot almost every weekend for the past 15 years. According to him, there was never a rock there. Not once. Still trying to make sense of it, I called my friend, the same one who had been with me on the first trip, and I asked him if he remembered the place and the rock. And of course, without missing a beat, he said, "Yeah, of course, the one that we joked about blowing up." And that's when it hit me. How could both of us remember the same massive rock that apparently never existed? My mind raced through possible explanations, but nothing made sense. Then, a thought crossed my mind that was just crazy enough to make sense. What if it wasn't a rock at all? What if it was a UFO or something, camouflaged to look like a rock? Maybe it had sort of someone else's problem field around it, making it invisible or even forgettable once it was gone. I still don't know what to think. One day, the rock was there, as solid as could be, and a year later, it was like it never existed at all. To this day, it's still one of the most baffling experiences I've ever had. Did reality just shift at the restaurant? A little while ago, my friend and I were eating at a restaurant. We hang out regularly and are really close, so it was just a normal day for us. We sat down, chatting about life, and soon the waitress came by to take our drink orders. She started listing off the available drinks, ending with root beer. To my surprise, my friend said that they wanted root beer. That caught me off guard because she never really orders that. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen her choose that before. My first thought was that maybe she was just influenced by the waitress, or maybe she wanted to try something different that day. I didn't question it too much though. I mean, sometimes people just feel like mixing things up. When it was my turn, I ordered the lemonade. Then, I excused myself to the bathroom because I really wanted to wash my hands. I have this thing where I like to make sure that my hands are clean before eating, especially after touching door handles and all of that. When I came back to the table, I noticed something odd. My necklace was lying on the ground right next to our table. It startled me at first because I really liked that necklace and I didn't remember it falling off. I picked it up, worried that it might be broken. I inspected the clasp, but it seemed perfectly fine. The latch still worked, and there were no signs of it snapping or coming loose. I usually make sure that my necklaces are secure when I put them on, even giving them a quick tug to test. It made no sense that it just fell off like that. Still holding the necklace, I looked up and I noticed something even stranger. My friend had a lemonade in front of her. I did a double take and I asked her, "Wait, didn't you order a root beer?" And she looked at me with a confused expression and said, "No, I ordered the lemonade." I paused for a second and I said, "Are you sure? I could have sworn that you asked for root beer." And she just shook her head and insisted that she never would have ordered that since she doesn't even like it that much. She looked at me like I was the one who was confused, but I was sure that I had heard her clearly earlier. It wasn't just my imagination. I knew what I heard. but she was adamant that she had ordered the lemonade all along, and that kind of made me second guess myself. Did I just mishear her? Or was my brain playing tricks on me? And what about my necklace? Did I somehow not clasp it properly, even though I always double check? I know it's not the strangest or the most shocking story, but it just stuck with me. These little things, my friend's drink, and my necklace appearing on the floor, felt too weird to ignore. I wonder if I had just made a mistake with both things, or if something else happened. I still think about it sometimes, but now I'm just trying to make sense of it all. Is this creepy, or is it just me? This might not sound all that crazy when you hear it, but I swear, experiencing it firsthand was one of the most trippy things that's ever happened to me. Even now, still thinking about it just gives me the chills. I like to call them my haunted Doc Martens. You see, I had this pair of Doc Martens shoes that I wore for years. I wore them everywhere. They were sturdy, comfortable, and honestly, they held up well over time. But eventually, I just got tired of them. You know how it is when you're just over a certain piece of clothing. So I decided it was time to retire them and move on. One day, I decided to go through my old clothes and pick out some things to donate. I figured I'd take them to one of those public donation bins in my town, like the ones where you can just toss your stuff in for people who might need it. As I was gathering things, I looked at my Doc Martens and thought, yeah, I'll donate these too. Someone else might get some use out of them. On a perfect sunny day, I loaded my car with the bags of clothes and those Doc Martens. They didn't fit in the bag, so I just put them on top. I drove over to one of those donation bins. I parked my car and got out. I clearly remember pulling the bags out first and tossing those into the bin. Then, I grabbed the Doc Martens separately. I distinctly remember holding them, one in each hand, and then tossing them into the bin. I even watched them fly through the air and land inside. I stood there for a sec, feeling a little relieved. I'd had those shoes in my car for weeks before I finally worked up the motivation to donate them, and it felt good to finally, let them go. A few weeks went by, maybe a month, and I was digging through my closet looking for something completely unrelated. I opened one of the closet doors, and I swear to you, I almost lost my mind right then and there. Sitting neatly on the floor were my Doc Martens, the exact same pair that I'd tossed into the donation bin. I could feel myself starting to freak out. My heart started to pound, and I just stood there, staring at them. It was like I was in shock over a pair of shoes, like a scene from a horror movie. I literally shouted in confusion and fell backwards, trying to process what I was seeing. My brother heard me freaking out and came running from the other room, asking what was wrong. I tried to explain, but I was so shaken that I could barely get the words out. I told him how I'd gotten rid of those shoes, how I had physically thrown them into the donation bin, and yet, here they were, placed perfectly back in my closet. After that, I just couldn't look at them the same way. It felt like they had some kind of eerie energy about them. I was too scared to even touch them or try to get rid of them again. I left them alone, almost like I was afraid they'd find their way back no matter what I did. It's been at least 5 years since that happened. I've moved since then, and I never saw those boots again. They didn't come with me in the move, and to be honest, I have no clue where they are now. I'm kind of a minimalist, so I don't have much stuff, but those Doc Martens just vanished. To this day, I cannot explain it. I really just hope they stay gone because I don't think I could handle seeing them again. I think my trash bag slipped into another dimension. This story might sound a bit silly, but honestly, it's been bugging me ever since it happened. You know how sometimes things just don't make sense, no matter how much you try to rationalize it? Well, this is one of those situations. So, I was looking for my trash bags, like the big yellow ones that I always keep in the exact same spot. I'm pretty particular about where I put them because I don't like hunting around for stuff when I need it. I never move them just for the sake of it. They're always just right there, neatly stored in a small case where I keep all of my cleaning supplies. Anyway, I needed them, so I went to the usual place. And you probably see where this is going. They weren't there. At first, I thought maybe I missed them, so I just started searching through the case more carefully. I emptied it completely. I pulled everything out and set it aside. There's no way that I could have overlooked them because these were bright yellow bags. You can't miss them. But they were still nowhere to be found. I felt a little bit like I was losing my mind. I retraced my steps, thinking that maybe I absent-mindedly just put them somewhere else. I checked every possible spot that they could be in, and nothing. It was like they just vanished into thin air. That was about a week ago, and I eventually gave up and bought new ones. I figured maybe I had used them all and just forgot. I couldn't come up with any other explanation, so I moved on. Today, though, things took a weird turn. I went back into that same storage area to grab something else, and there they were. The yellow trash bags sitting right in the small case where they should have been the whole time. They were just sitting there as if they'd never disappeared in the first place. The thing is, though, they're not the new ones I bought last week. I still have those. These are the exact same ones that I had been looking for, and I know they weren't there before. So where were they this whole time? It makes no sense. I know for a fact that I thoroughly searched that case last week. I pulled everything out. It's honestly messing with my head. It's like they just blinked out of existence for a week and then decided to come back when I wasn't looking. I don't know. Has anyone else experienced anything like this? I feel like I'm losing it. Who or what is screaming in the woods? My family and I moved to Southwest Alaska about a year and a half ago. For the most part, everything was normal at first. Life in Alaska was what we expected. Quiet, peaceful, and surrounded by nature. We were getting used to the remote lifestyle and the sounds of the wilderness. But about 6 or 7 months ago, things started to get weird. It began with a scare that still gives me chills when I think about it. My sister came running into the house, looking pale and freaked out. She said she heard a man screaming at the top of his lungs from the woods. It sounded like he was yelling for help, and calling out the name Sarah. The thing was, though, she couldn't be entirely sure because the scream was so loud, but also sounded kind of distant. At first, I didn't believe her. I figured it was just our neighbors who lived in the general direction where she heard the voice. Maybe they were messing around or something. But she insisted it didn't sound like them. I still brushed it off and moved on. But then, about a month ago, I heard it too. I was inside when I suddenly heard the same eerie scream, a man's voice shouting desperately. My heart was pounding, and I quickly grabbed my handgun just in case. I called for my sister, and we both rushed outside. As we stood there listening, the screaming gradually got quieter and quieter. My sister looked at me wide-eyed and whispered that it was the exact same voice and tone and words as before. And that's when I started questioning my initial assumption about it being our neighbors. The scream wasn't coming from that direction. Our neighbors live more to the west, but this sound was clearly coming from the north. Plus, it didn't sound like it was at a distance where our neighbors would be. Something just didn't add up. And then the noises started happening at night. One time, I was home alone because my family had gone on a trip to visit some relatives, and I stayed behind to take care of the animals. It was about 4 a.m. when I woke up suddenly to a loud bang. I wasn't groggy at all, which was strange because I'm always half asleep when I first wake up, especially at 4 in the morning. I immediately got dressed and again grabbed my handgun. I cleared the house, room by room, but found absolutely nothing. The weirdest part was that my dog, who usually barks at the slightest noise, was sound asleep in my room. It was like she didn't hear the banging noise at all. I went outside to check for signs of what might have caused the noise, but there were no tracks, no animal prints, no sign of anything that could have made a noise that loud. It's not just the screams and the bangs that have me on edge. We've also had some dead chickens around the property, and I can't figure out why. I try to rationalize all of this because I don't really believe in anything supernatural. I've never put much stock in things like Wendigos or any other kind of folklore like that, but honestly, with everything happening around here, it's getting harder and harder to explain it away. I just don't know what to think anymore. It's unsettling, to say the least. Has anyone else experienced something like this? Light bulb changed by other dimension me. I have to admit something. I've read a lot of posts on this subreddit, and honestly, I used to laugh at how ridiculous some of them seemed. You know, stories that sound like they're straight out of a sci-fi movie. I never thought I'd be posting one here though. But something happened recently that I just can't explain. And now I'm seriously wondering if I experienced a glitch in the Matrix. So, I've got this chandelier-style lamp in my dining nook. It's one of those decorative ones with 5 light bulbs that are shaped like candles. A couple of weeks ago, I noticed that one of the bulbs had gone out. It annoyed me because these aren't just any bulbs. Like I said, they're the kind that look like candles, so they're a bit of a pain to replace. I remembered that I had some spare bulbs somewhere, so I went digging through the cupboard where I usually keep them. And to my frustration, they weren't there. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen and I noticed that the cupboard door was open. I went to close it, and as I bent down, I saw the package of light bulbs sitting right there. I pulled it out and I counted 2 brand new bulbs, just as I remembered. I figured it must have been my cat who opened the cupboard. He loves to poke around in there, so it wasn't that surprising. I was just relieved that I didn't need to go out and buy more bulbs. I made a mental note to change the burnt out one later. A couple of days go by, and I hadn't gotten around to replacing the bulb yet. One evening, I was sitting at the dining table and I turned on the chandelier. As I walked into the kitchen, I glanced back at the light and I noticed something strange. All 5 bulbs were working. I stopped in my tracks and I thought, wait a minute. That bulb was definitely out just the other day. I tried to brush it off as maybe just some faulty wiring or something, but as I got closer, I noticed that something was even weirder. 4 of the bulbs were a little dusty and clouded, like they had been in there for a while. But the 5th bulb, the one that was supposedly burnt out just a few days earlier, was bright, clear, and completely shiny. Even the tiny wires inside looked brand new. And that's when my brain did a little somersault. I thought to myself, did I change it without remembering? But no, that doesn't make any sense. I went to check the cupboard again, and sure enough, there were still 2 bulbs left in the package. I hadn't used any of them. And here's the kicker. I would have remembered changing that bulb. It's not an easy task because the only chair nearby is a wheeled office chair, which is definitely not safe to stand on. But you know I'd do it anyway. Plus, I'm not exactly known for being on top of things like changing light bulbs right away. I told my friend about it, and she just laughed and said I must have jumped dimensions into one where the other me actually has their life together and changes light bulbs on time. I had to laugh too, because honestly, what else could it be? It was just so bizarre. And now, I'm left wondering if maybe I did slip into some parallel universe where my house is slightly more organized. Or maybe it's just one of those strange coincidences that make you question your own memory. Either way, it's got me thinking differently about those stories that I used to laugh at. Maybe reality is more flexible than I thought. The pear tree is now somehow a crabapple tree. This happened in the summer of 2021, and honestly, I wasn't planning to share it until a friend convinced me that it might belong here. A little background first. Growing up, one of my favorite parts of visiting my grandparents' house was the pear tree in their backyard. This wasn't just any pear tree. It produced the sweetest, most delicious pears I've ever tasted. To this day, I struggle to enjoy store-bought or any other pears because they just don't compare. The tree stood a short walk away from their old burn pile, so every time we had to burn trash, we'd walk right past it. It was a staple of my childhood. As I got older, I started helping my grandparents out more, especially in the summers. One summer, while carrying trash out to the burn pile, I remember stepping on a fallen pear and twisting my ankle. It hurt, but even then, I remember being more annoyed that I squished one of those perfect pears than anything else. And it wasn't just me who was attached to that tree either. My mom and aunt used to talk about eating those pears when they were kids, and in the later years, when my grandmother became housebound, my grandfather would pick pears from that tree and bring them to her inside the house. It was something small, but something special between them. Unfortunately, both my grandparents passed away in 2020. Natural causes, nothing pandemic related. My grandma was 90 and my grandpa was 95. After some time, our family came together to clean out the house, and I eventually inherited the property and moved in the following spring of 2021. That summer, I decided to get an arborist out to inspect a large oak tree in the backyard. One of the limbs looked like it was dying, and I wanted to be sure that it wasn't diseased or dangerous. While he was there, he offered to take a look at the rest of the trees on the property just to be safe. I actually appreciated that, and I let him do a walk around. After giving everything else the green light, he mentioned that all of the other trees looked healthy. I made an offhand comment, something like, "Well, that's a relief." That was leaf. The puns on this one, man, I love it. I was worried about the pear tree not producing anything this year. And then he gave me this confused look and said, "What pear tree?" I pointed toward the tree by the burn pile and I said, "That one right there." He walked over, looked up at it for a few seconds, and then chuckled and said, "That's not a pear tree. That's a crabapple tree. See, here?" He motioned for me to come over, and sure enough, the branches were full of crabapples. I was stunned. I wasn't just misremembering. This was the same tree that I'd walked past for years. The same one that I picked pears from with my grandparents. The one that even injured my ankle with the fallen pear. I stared at the crabapples, confused and speechless. After he left, I quickly called my aunt, and I told her what had just happened, and at first, she thought I was messing with her. "You're joking," she said. "That's the pear tree," I told her. "I know, that's what I thought too, but it's not." She was so thrown off that she came over within the hour. She only lives about a mile down the road, and when she got there and saw it with her own eyes, she was just as shocked as I was. She kept shaking her head, walking around the tree and saying, "No way, no way." But it was real. No pears, just crabapples. As if the tree had always been a crabapple tree. There were no sign of the pears, no indication that anything had ever changed, except our memories of it. To this day, I have no explanation. I've lived on this property for years now, and I still walk by that same tree, and every time I see it, I feel like I've lost something important. Something small, yes, but meaningful to me and my entire family. The pears are gone, but the memories aren't. I don't know what happened. I just want my grandparents' pear tree back. In my most recent episode, I presented a story in a bit of a different way than what you're used to hearing me share. But a lot of you really enjoyed it, so I'm going to do it again here. This story is just as crazy as that one, filled with just as many coincidences, and of course is allegedly true. It's called the Jim Twins. Imagine you've lived your life thinking that you were an only child. You grow up, you get married, raise a family, and eventually settle into a routine. Then one day, you find out that you have a twin. Not just a sibling, a literal identical twin. That alone would be shocking enough, but then you learn that your twin grew up with the same first name, had the same hobbies, married women with the same name, and even named his dog the exact same thing that you named yours. How could this be real? How could two people, raised in completely different environments, live nearly identical lives? That's the story of the Jim twins, and it's, of course, allegedly 100% true. In 1940, in the state of Ohio, a pair of identical twin boys were born. Their mother, unable to care for them, put them up for adoption. The adoption agency, for reasons that no one can explain, placed the boys in separate homes without telling either adoptive family that their new son had a twin brother. The boys were only a few weeks old when they were split up. Their new families lived in different towns, had different backgrounds, and they didn't know each other. So how is it that decades later, their lives turned out to be mirror images of each other? Let's start with the names. One of the boys was adopted by a family who named him James. The other? Also adopted by a family who named him James. Two different families, no contact, no communication, both named their adopted sons James. But, okay, James was a popular name. It's not too strange, is it? As the boys grew up, separately, again, they both developed an interest in mechanics and carpentry. They both enjoyed math and hated spelling. That's already unusual, but it gets weirder. Each James married a woman named Linda. They both had sons, who they each named James Allen. One is spelled Allen with 2 L's, and the other is spelled with 1 L. Close enough to raise some eyebrows. But it doesn't stop there. Both Jameses got divorced and both remarried, this time to women named Betty. They also each owned a dog. Both dogs were named Toy. I can't help but wonder, how in the world is this possible? Is this the world's largest prank, or something much deeper? In 1979, at the age of 39, one of the Jims, Jim Lewis, started getting curious about his family history. He had always known that he was adopted, but he never knew the details. Eventually, through some paperwork and some persistence, he discovered that he had a twin brother. That brother, Jim Springer, had also been curious about his origins, and before long, the two made contact. They agreed to meet in person, and that's when everything started to unravel. At their first meeting, they began comparing notes. As they talked, the coincidences started stacking up. Same name, same profession, same hobbies, same bizarre pattern of relationships. They both chain-smoked Salem cigarettes. They both had migraines. Both of them drove the exact same car, and they both vacationed at the same beach in Florida. What are the odds? Naturally, this reunion sparked huge interest, especially among scientists that were studying twins at the time. The Jim twins were brought to the University of Minnesota to take part in a twin study being conducted by Dr. Thomas Bouchard. And what the researchers found was stunning. Despite being raised separately, with no knowledge of each other, the Jims displayed eerily similar brainwave patterns and voice inflections and IQ scores. Their test results on personality assessments were nearly identical. So what does that mean? Were their lives a product of biology alone? Could genetics be so powerful that they override upbringing, environment, and experience? Or was there some other unknown force at work? Some strange, magnetic pull that shaped their decisions to mirror one another's. This story ignited the age-old debate of nature versus nurture. Are we shaped more by our environment or by our DNA? The Jim twins became a prime example in the argument for nature, that our genes play a more significant role than we realize. But still, even among identical twins, these parallels were bizarrely specific. I mean, naming your dog Toy? Twice? In two different households. That's not genetics. That's something else. After the story broke, the Jim twins became minor celebrities in the psychology world. Their case was documented in numerous books and research papers, and they continued to participate in studies for years. But beyond the science, their story had a much more emotional layer. The Jims weren't an experiment. Well, they were. But they were also two people who lost decades of brotherhood, only to find each other again in the most surreal way imaginable. They remained close after their reunion, finally getting to experience life as twins, something that they'd missed out on for nearly 40 years. So what explains the near-identical lives of the Jim twins? Was it biology? Destiny? Or are we just trying to make sense of a statistical outlier so bizarre that it feels like a simulation glitch? Whatever the explanation, this story leaves us with some unsettling questions. How much of our lives are truly our own choices? And if someone is out there living a life just like yours, without ever meeting you, would you even know? Would you even want to know? The story of the Jim twins is perhaps the most compelling evidence that sometimes truth really is stranger than fiction. And it's just one of the many stories that I'd like to tell in this series where impossible sounding things actually happened. If you enjoyed this, then stay tuned for the next episode, because I want to talk about a man who survived both atomic bombs. And trust me, that one is just as unbelievable as this one, maybe more.